My proposal is somewhat different than Mr. Teitz's based on our different interpretation of that statute. What I am proposing for a town resolution would have the following sections. First of all, the town council of Tiverton will be considered the governing body for purposes of this statute, and the statute does refer to a governing body. I believe that the town council is the governing body of the town of Tiverton. Secondly, I would adopt the proposal by Mr. Teitz, and I'll read that for the benefit of people who do not have a copy. Paragraph 2. The town council, I'm adopting section 1 that Mr. Teitz has suggested. The town administrator, in consultation with the chairman of the budget committee and the treasurer, shall be deemed to act for the city or town as set forth in subsection D of the Act, with regard to, and this is the language of the Act, forecasting, anticipating, or experiencing any of the conditions necessitating exceeding the cap. So that would become my section 2. And finally, my proposal for paragraph 3 would read, quote, any levy pursuant to subsection D of this section must be approved by the affirmative vote of at least 4/5 of the full membership of the town council and a majority of the electors present and voting at the town financial meeting. I believe, as some have suggested, that this simply be left to a majority vote at the financial town meeting means that we're in effect totally ignoring subsection D, for which there is absolutely no ambiguity, and it ignores the intent of the General Assembly in subsection E, which is obviously looking for a supermajority on a vote that would exceed the cap. In short, my proposals are broken down into 3 paragraphs, which I would substitute for the 3 paragraphs suggested by Mr. Teitz. As Mr. Teitz has conceded, the purpose of paragraph 3 that he's recommended is a presentation of his view. If I understand this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Teitz, that when we show up at the financial town meeting, even if nobody has ever considered exceeding the cap, even if it's never been certified in Providence, even if there has been no approval by this town council, somebody could get up at the financial town meeting and say, in effect, I want to exceed the cap by the following amount. And all we would need is a majority vote, and it would carry. I don't think that that was the intent of this statute, and I don't think it's supported by the language of this statute. So, thank you for your consideration.
Can I make a few points, Mr. Lambert?
You have the floor.
Well, first, I don't think for a moment that anybody is disputing, and I don't think Mr. Teitz is disputing, but we can hear from him, the fact that the statute, when it was amended, required the town or city, if they were to exceed the cap, that they must fall within the statutory provisions and seek the state approval. I don't think anybody questions that. So all your remarks based upon what you have said, I think, are not in accordance with the fact that there is a process that we must follow. And that process involves carrying the burden that if we do attempt to exceed the cap, we have to get state approval.
Right.
okay?
I don't disagree with that.
No, and I don't think anybody in this room disagrees with that,
Right.
okay? The next question is, what approvals, and assuming the state comes back and they say, yes, you have met your burden under the statute. And for those that have not been through this is a burden. They do have their analysts at the state level. They look at all your facts and figures. And when the town did this, I believe in 2008, after the statute was amended, we sat through meetings at the state level. They asked for, Mr. Steckman was here at the time, Jim, I'm not going to call upon you, chairman of the budget committee. I mean, there is a process. Let me just end it right there. And then they said, yes, you do qualify. And that is, I think that is a process, everybody can agree to that. We have to follow, and I don't think the state can give you approval unless you have met your burden under the statute.
So do you, if I can interrupt,
So-
while we're still on that issue, use my hypothetical. What you're saying then, is that if somebody would stand up at the financial town meeting,
Nobody's ever done that. I mean, and then nobody,
the village idiot is a long-standing Anglo-Saxon tradition. Anybody can do it.
Well, I
My
think-
question to you is,
But hold on.
if somebody were to do that, and we haven't gone through the process of subsection
I think a
D,
suit would lie if that motion
Well, what
passed.
I'm saying is then, based on what the representations you're making and your interpretation, that would mean that the moderator of the financial town meeting should rule that motion out of
Probably,
order.
probably.
Okay.
Okay. The disagreement is on the approval. And this is where there is disagreement. When this act was passed, Senator Piverweed was determined to be the author of this, the 3050 Act. The approval that she laid out in a conference of what the legislature means, I have a copy of it. We attended. I can tell you who the attendees were, including representatives of the schools, the town administrator, and I'm going to read you what they put together. They, and I'm going to give you the list. Gary Sass, former Director of Revenue. Walter Felag, Chairman of the Finance Committee. And they were the Senate leadership, as well as Mr. Sass, Susan Arnold, Dan Beardsley, Robert Walsh, blah, blah, Russ Daneker, who was then the Senate Fiscal Advisor. And they assembled the various communities to this conference. And it said, this is the process you have to go through. And in addition, and I have the copy, if anybody wants to read it, was very clear. It says, once you've gone through this state process, a 4/5 vote of the full membership of the municipal governing body, or where financial town meetings are held, a majority vote of the electors.
And it doesn't say that in the statute, does it?
This-
That's not what it says in the statute, and that's my point. More than 1/4
Mr. President, I think we listened to you,
Yeah,
so
okay.
let him finish.
All right.
That is not what the statute says.
This is the legislative leadership who wrote the statute in the state, and that is what they said. I'll get back to your statute in a moment, because even in what you are proposing, I think, is that the council do something that is not permitted under the charter. We cannot, under our charter, decide what will go to the financial town meeting. Because there's no process for that.